inserting voices into people's heads by using laser light. Now, of course, if the Department of Defense is discovering this, I would assume that it's mischievous, but nonetheless they did, and it's worth talking about because it led us back into the basis of what is described in the Bible, the whole book of it. The implications concerning light entering into your head. Think of that. That's not too hard to think of. But then once it gets in there, it starts talking. I would assume that for the Department of Defense, they would like to have the enemy, and then shoot the lasers at him, and the voice would say, "Yeah, your mother's calling, get out of here," or something like that. But anyhow, it raises implications for us, which are, I think, interesting. And it goes back to the Old Testament and the New Testament in the Bible. And as the more we do this, the more we focus on something that is extremely difficult but extremely important for us to understand. Numbers 23:19 in the Old Testament, God is not a man. How can we ever get through that? Because God is pictured as a father, somebody with a long beard. Oh, he doesn't like it when you go to Atlantic City, and he gets upset if you, do anything, have sex or whatever, But no, when we find out he's not even a man and probably can't even have sex. I would assume if he's not human, he doesn't have sex. But that's not true altogether, because in electricity there's male and female, isn't there? Never mind. 1 John 1:5. This then is the message which we have heard of him and declare unto you, that God is light. Which then would mean that what we call God is actually photon. What we call God is actually an energy in a subatomic quantum realm that is invisible. Okay? Has no arms or legs or heads or anything like that like we do. Is not a human, but is light. And once you see that, then you see the government saying that they've experimented with ways that light can go into a person's head and talk. Then you have to say, well, is that the way this works? Now, who would know this? And this goes back to the second part. We've been spending a lot of weeks recently on the Greek involvement in the construction of the Bible. And mainly the fact that these classical Greeks, whoever they were or wherever they came from, had knowledge of the subatomic structure of the atoms and light and all of that kind of business. And so once you see this, you attribute it to them, and now we also can go to step 2, which says you are created in the image and likeness of God, and God is light. So your physical being becomes almost irrelevant, because physically you are created in the image and likeness of your mother and your father. But God is something altogether. God is photon. So are you and I, and we dwell in the quantum realm, but all we sense is in the three-dimensional physical realm. And so it becomes very confusing for us. But let's move on with that. So we see here that what we call God is light, and that comes to us direct from these scientific minds of these classical Greeks. But it places the power of what we call God in the realm of the quantum, the subatomic, not in this three-dimensional realm. Okay? So we wipe the board of all words kind of like spirit and angels and all of that stuff, and we realize that what we're actually dealing with are energy elements in the subatomic realm. So then how could you describe God? Because God is simply a word. There is no person called that. God is a takeoff from the word good. Okay? But now we have a new way and say, how would you describe what we have always called God? I would say is the supreme photon, the highest element of photon. And of course, we're way down on the scale, I would assume. But I have spoken numerous times about the light that will and is descending from, first of all, supernova 1987A, and we're still waiting for this massive explosion that NASA predicted, but whatever. But there is light, and I have proposed that is the seventh seal of the book of Revelation. So light coming from there then would be the seventh seal and have the impact not on the physical body, but on our photon body, on our electro body. And then we have Eta Carina, which I have proposed is the seventh angel of the book of Revelation. And we've already had visitations from Eta Carina with gamma rays hitting the earth. So that's already arrived. Okay, so how do we do this, and how can we pause for just a second and say, no, wait a minute. We're talking about ourselves in a whole different realm. The people that wrote the Bible, these so-called classic Greeks, were not directing the comments towards the physical. They were directing the comments towards the non-physical. Not the spiritual, because there is no such thing as that. What we call spiritual, now we know, is quantum. It's in the subatomic level. So basically then, what comes down from supernova 1987A and Eta Carina are angles of light. And the reason that light angles to the Earth is because as light travels at 186,400 and it comes past a celestial body, the gravitational pull of that celestial body causes the light to bend. And it comes in as an angle. It's an angle of light. So it's an angle. It's a photon. And what do we have? Albert Einstein told us that a photon is a messenger particle. So we have an angle of light who is a messenger particle, and by the time it gets into the mythology of the Bible, it becomes an angel of light who is a messenger of the supreme photon. And basically, that's what it is. And that's exactly what it is. And I'll tell you something else. It couldn't be anything else, because that's the only thing that we react to. The only thing that the human body, chemical and electricity, is it. And so what comes to us in the form of light. Now, Eta Carina, which I propose the seventh angel, is pouring light in the form of lasers. A NASA artist some years ago drew what NASA believed is the core of Eta Carina and what is pouring out from there. Now, let's take a look at his drawing. And you can see the lasers just pouring out, and you can imagine the energy. An artist's concept of multiple laser beams pouring from the heart of Eta Carina. And the credit goes to James Gitlin Space Telescope Science Institute. So here now, and this is important to keep in mind as we look at this other discovery. Here we have lasers coming from what I proposed as the seventh angel of the book of Revelation. And of course, we talk about light coming from above, and then we talk about God talking to us and God communicating and all this kind of stuff that, for the most part, we've made up. Now, I never really focused any further than that. I mean, that's too awesome. Who can comment on it? But I retained that. And as we retain all of this knowledge, waiting for something to come and make sense of it. Because, if these lasers are coming down here, so I've had people ask me how I felt the world could be changed, and I would always answer that it can't be changed by people. It's way too far gone. I mean, there's nothing that can be done. But the change would have to be from descending light, and now we know it's in the form of lasers, that would impact the human brain mind. We would have to, in other words, hear from above, and there would have to be a mass mind change. And this was always a bit out there, people would, because it's not, how does that happen? We're going to have lasers, and everybody's going to, I'm going to be happy. But as we see these light beings, lasers, or angles, or angels, or messenger particles, and we would just simply say, well, maybe in some strange way they can make us think differently. But we never really had anything to base that on. Just said it and see what happens. I never could provide any scientific documentation of this kind of thing until now. The question always was, how can some light descending convey any information? I mean, but you know why we never can figure this out? Because we always figure ourselves, we consider ourselves as, stuff. Three-dimensional stuff. People. And so how could we never have really sat back and say, I'm really not stuff. I operate stuff. I live inside of stuff, but I'm not stuff. I'm photon. And so if photon descends in the form of laser, can it communicate? Can it talk to the photon who I am? It would kind of seem feasible that electrical lasers could make some kind of switch adjustments in the brain. But now a headline concerning experiments carried out by the military has to make us look at this in a new way. Look at what the headline says. Pentagon report investigates lasers that put voices in your head. Oh, when you see that, and you've ever heard people say, gee, I don't know, I thought I heard somebody. Or somebody knows they heard somebody, But now you never know. You don't know, do you? A person hears voices. Laser light has the ability to put voices in your head. Could lasers then coming from supernova or Eta Carina put instructional voices in our heads? Could light coming from the electro minds of those who have departed be the voices that people claim to hear? Do you see what I'm saying to you is all of this stuff that we consider bizarre, off the wall, this person has got dementia or demented or nuts or whatever the heck it is. Really, we don't know anymore. Once the mind or the brain is adjusted for whatever reason and is able to pick up these incoming signals, who knows? Let's look at the documentation. The Department of Defense, a recently unclassified report from the Pentagon has revealed an investigation into using laser beams for a new purpose. Some of the applications the report investigated include putting voices in people's heads, using lasers to trigger uncontrolled neuron firing, and slowly heating the human body to a point of feverish confusion. Now, this is, you can see the Department of Defense would be in that. And, whatever else they want to use it for, I'm not interested in it. I'm only interested in the point of scientifically concluding that you could put voices in people's heads. Let's go to the next one. The report explains several types of non-lethal applications, including microwave hearing, disrupted neural control, and microwave heating. For the first type, short pulses of RF energy can generate a pressure wave in solids and liquids. When exposed to pulsed RF energy, humans experience the immediate sensation of microwave hearing. Sounds that may include buzzing, ticking, hissing, or knocking that originate within the head. Now, this is an interesting thing because I have what they called tinnitus. I hear that buzzing all the time. Now I'm kind of thinking, hey, somebody's in touch with me. It must be. That's what it says. I don't know. Who knows? I hear it right. And I don't hear it until I remind or I tell somebody I got it, Some of the applications the report investigated included putting voices in people's heads, using lasers to trigger neuron firing and slowly heating the human body to a point of confusion. We read that, okay? And we'll go to the last one. Exposure to the pulses doesn't cause any permanent effects, as all effects ceased almost immediately after the exposure. As the report explains, tuning microwave hearing could enable communicating with individuals from a distance of up to several hundred meters. Can you imagine someday when you'll call somebody and you don't need a phone? You dial it in your head.
Can't do it. Doesn't cost anything.
Well, it doesn't cost anything. Touche, that's it. It'll never, that's like Dugan's electric truck 100 years ago. Oh, can't have that. Because the frequency of the sound heard is dependent on the pulse characteristics, it seems possible that this technology could be developed to the point where words could be transmitted to be heard like the spoken word, except that it could only be heard within a person's head. In one experiment, communication of the words from 1 to 10 using speech-modulated microwave energy was successfully demonstrated. Microphones next to the person experiencing the voice could not pick up these sounds. Now, you could go and come here and people would say, oh, this is a cult, or all this crazy business, because light's going to come down and talk to you. Hey, yeah, sure. There it is. Light is going to talk to you. So if you hear people talking in your head, maybe somebody's shooting a laser at you. I don't know. But let us pause for a second. The information comes from the Department of Defense, and they want to get into people's heads for all kinds of mischievous reasons. But think about it. What we talked about a minute ago. God is light. Photons are intelligent light beings. Laser light coming from above on an angle is an invisible messenger particle. Therefore, this is a dramatic and unrecognized reality of existence. And it's so hard, but if you could just come with me and think about this. We are all beings who live in that subatomic quantum world. What we call God is the supreme photon. Jesus would be a higher photon. We operate bodies to experience physical existence. That is what we are. We are intelligent light that can operate physical, material bodies equipped with a computer brain that we can send signals through. You see what I'm saying? Well, can light make words in your head? You're hearing them. Yeah? The words that are coming out are words that I am making up in the photon realm, in the quantum realm where I exist. Okay. Now, I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I showed you something from Gary Zukav's book, The Dancing Woolly Master, where he talked about subatomic light photons, what I'm talking about and what I'm saying you are. And I wanted to show you a couple of things from his book. The question is, now what they had is they had an experiment in which light went through slits in a board. Okay. The question is, how did the photon in the first experiment know that the second slit was not open? Think about it. If both slits are open, there are always alternating bands of illuminated and dark areas. This means that there are always areas where the photons never go. Otherwise, there never would be any dark areas. If one of the slits is closed, there is no interference, and the dark bands disappear. The whole wall becomes illuminated, including those areas which previously were dark when both slits were open. When we fired our photon and it went through the first slit, how did it know? See the way they know. How did it know that it could go to an area that must be dark if the other slit were open? Don't try, in straddling your mind trying to, what the heck are you talking about? Don't, that's just make it confusing. That's not the point here. This is the point. These are scientists. So, in other words, how did the photon know that the other slit was closed? This is the only point I want you to dwell on. This light was intelligent. The photon knew. Now, can you imagine this? You would say, well, I know this for a fact. Well, the photon knew this for a fact. The central mystery of quantum theory, wrote Henry Stapp. How does information get around so quick? How does the particle know that there are two slits? Let's go to the next one. This is where it gets good. Whether Walker is correct or not, it appears that if there really are photons, and the photoelectric effect proves that there are, this isn't something you have faith on, then it also appears that the photons in the double-slit experiment somehow knew whether or not both slits are open, and that they act accordingly. In other words, I'm coming down this way. Oh, well, that road's blocked off. I'm going to take a right turn, and I act accordingly. See, why? How? Because it's you and me. These photons inside of bodies become people. Now, this is where it gets. This brings us back to where we started. Now, look at this. Something is organic if it has the ability to process information and to act accordingly. We have little choice but to acknowledge that photons, which are energy, do appear to process information and to act accordingly. And that therefore, strange as it may sound, they seem to be organic. Since we are also organic, there is a possibility that by studying photons and other energy quanta, we may learn something about us. And what I've said for years, and I tell you as more and more comes in, yes, you're going to learn about us. You're going to learn that you're one of the photons.
Bill?
Yes?
Bill Gates just was talking about that in about 10 years or so, that computers are going to be organic.
Uh-huh.
That there will be no they don't need the electrical thing anymore. Because it's going to be...
Yeah,
the purpose is a living machine.
Right. The question, that always hits my mind, what about 500 years from now, or that? What in the world? Or would, I don't know. But that's very interesting. And so we have this organic light, which is us. The photons must be organic. In other words, even though they exist in the subatomic quantum realm, they must be able to interact with physical organisms. The photons are us. God is light. Jesus is light of the world. And that's what it means. We're taking all of these things. I mean, we got pictures of Jesus with the long hair and flowers, and God is sitting up there reaching his finger and all this kind of stuff. And it's nice and it's Disney-esque and all of that stuff, but that's not what it is. We are part of it inside of ourselves. Do you see, maybe for the first time in your life, I know it's the first time in my life, how science says not only is it possible for light to enter into your head and become a voice and speak to you, it's been done. If our society, which may be kind of backward when considering advanced civilizations, can make this happen in a primitive way, what could an advanced civilization from this quantum realm do? And are those voices that people hear and talk with actually light beings who transmit into them? And are those ideas that we get communications from another dimension of light? I just had a great idea or something, right? Where'd it come from? It's like when you can't remember something. And then you go off and you're talking about something else and bang, oh, I know. Where'd that come from? Who sent it to you? What all this means is that text, such as we find in the Bible, is not meant for physical bodies, but for light beings. The photon which is in you, in the quantum realm, is what makes decisions and transmit those decisions into the computer, which is your brain. Biblical words are not intended for physical bodies. Bodies are stuff. Stuff cannot think. Stuff cannot plan or organize. Something must be conscious. There must be intelligence. Let me show you what I mean. This is your brain. It doesn't have numbers on it. Well, maybe it does. Now you look at it. This is something. And what I'm going to say is a little gross, but nonetheless it's true. That's meat. A cat would eat that. Or a dog, or... Absolutely. Absolutely. Now the thing is, you have to sit there and think, is that thing capable of loving, of planning, of dreaming, of organizing? Is that thing capable? Or does it need some intelligence to operate it? Because most people live in their church and everything feel on the basis that this is them. See? What good is that if there isn't somebody plugged into it? That's photon. That's who you are. Because everybody's got one of those. Is that stuff capable of loving or planning or thinking? It is, excuse the expression again, a meat computer. And doesn't someone have to operate it? Look. Here it is again. And there's the computer. What is the difference? Oh, this is much more sophisticated. No. There is no computer on the face of the earth that's like this one. I agree. No, that's not questioning that. But you see a computer on the left, and you see a computer on the right. But aside from the fact that they're both computers, if there's no intelligence to operate them, they're worthless. This thing could sit on a table for 1,000,000 years and rot, and it's not worth anything. there has to be an intelligence to sit down and put intelligent things in there. This thing is the same way. You could put this in the display case at the ShopRite. Without an intelligence to input, what good is it? You see what I'm saying? So you know who's the person that does that, but who's the person that operates this? You have one of these, and you operate it. It doesn't, now when it malfunctions, you're still the same you, but this part's not working. And so everybody that's on the other side in the physical realm doesn't know that you're the same you, because you can't get this thing to work. So how does it work? The intelligence, which is photon, which is subatomic quantum light, you and me, inputs intelligence into the computer here on the left. Okay? I mean, you gotta think this way now, because otherwise we're stuck. There's no way for this thing to do anything unless some kind of intelligence is input into its signals and its circuitry. So the computer, the intelligence, which is you and me, inputs to the computer on the left. Just stay over there, Kath, while I go through this if you can. Now, the computer on the left can then send the input signals through its wiring to the physical robot, which we are, and then, in turn, we can input intelligence into the computer on the right. Nothing can input onto this computer unless it's intelligent. But in order to get intelligence, we have to input signals into the computer on the left, and then they get unscrambled and send all the signals, and then we can take that information and put it on the computer on the right. And then the computer on the right can function by putting information back into the intelligence photon, which can then take that information and put it back into the computer on the left. Computer on the right puts information into the computer on the left, puts information in the computer on the right. Computer on the right then sends back information that goes back into the computer on the left. And it goes, So both the computer on the left and the computer on the right are totally dependent on intelligent information to come from the invisible photon who is operating both of them. Let us say that this is dead. And this is plugged in and waiting. Nothing will ever be able to go into this computer because this computer is unplugged. Okay? It requires a photon person, you, to input into here so that then input can be put into there. That's the way it is. It has nothing to do with physical bodies per se, because the physical body is stuff. Unless there's intelligence going in here, this is worthless and that's worthless.
What makes intelligent photons? All things ain't the same.
No. The brain is a physical thing. The photon is not a physical thing. The photon is dwells in the quantum subatomic level. It is light. The photon is a creation, we're going to call it God or the supreme photon. The photon is totally invisible. Without the brain, the photon exists. And the photon, as we saw from Gary Zukav, is intelligent. It knows what to do. With the brain, the photon can then exist in the physical realm. In other words, when this dies, you go about your business in the quantum realm. The photon does not depend on that for life, but this brain depends on the photon for life. You just have to look and say, is a piece of meat capable of thinking and doing and all this? Of course not. Of course not. Now, what is important to keep in mind is intelligent light, as we have seen. There is no doubt that we are not physical bodies, but we operate the physical bodies in the same way that we operate a car. Let's take your car as a brain. What is your car doing out in the parking lot now? You hope it's just sitting there. If some intelligent car thief gets in it, it will become intelligent and it will go away. But in the meantime, it's worthless. It's worthless. Now, we've talked a lot about the Bible being Greek mythology. What time did I start? Does anybody?
4 to 8.
What time is it now?
4 to 8. 20 after 8.
I started 7:45 and it's 20 after 8. Oh, okay, keep me posted. We talked about the Bible being Greek mythology. We went over for several weeks. The Bible reflecting the minds of Aristotle, Democritus, Plato, Socrates, and all that. These were people. And putting it mildly, you have to say, way ahead of their time. So much that they had to be beings. They had to be beings from another dimension of light, because who taught them this stuff? They spoke of the forces of the subatomic quantum world, the invisible world of light. And they, and I will take this anywhere, they are the ones who wrote the Bible. Incidentally, while I said I'd take this in just for the, got nothing to do, on April the 6th, I've been invited to speak to the Unitarian Universalists in Lakewood, is it? Or Lakewood or Toms River. And I will be there Sunday afternoon. And that should be interesting.
Well, they're like,
Yeah. But anyhow.
Billy, they're like-minded.
No, I know they're like-minded, but it still should be interesting, because outside of this room and except on television, I never hardly, rarely have face-to-face expressed this stuff. And so I again say it would be interesting, because for a lot of people, they'll be hearing this approach for the first time. I mean, even when people are open-minded, this kind of approach is really different, because what you're doing is not simply saying, well, we believe in the spiritual realm and the invisible. You're talking about scientific proof of how this stuff works. So. But Aristotle and Empedocles actually produced the basic structure of the Bible when they spoke of the 4 elements. Empedocles started it, Aristotle amplified it, and talked of the 4 elements. The entire Bible is based on the 4 elements, which are macrocosm of what? Earth, water, air, and fire. That's in external nature. But they took it a step further. They took it into the microcosm of the human brain and said, not only is there earth, water, air, and fire on the outside, there's earth, water, air, and fire in here, in that subatomic realm. So, now, Aristotle, there's a slide here about Aristotle, and we'll take a look at it. That's somebody's impression of him. And this is what it says. Aristotle, practical as ever in his determination to get things worked out in detail, proposes a new theory, thousands of years ago, to explain how the 4 elements of Empedocles and the atoms of Democritus produce the wide range of substances apprehended by our senses. He suggests that there are 2 pairs of alternates, hot and cold, moist and dry, which provide the exact nature of matter. In broad terms, the 4 possible combinations are the 4 elements: earth, cold and dry, air, hot and moist, fire, hot and dry, water, cold and moist. But it is the infinitely variable balance between these qualities which creates the different atoms of stone or wood, bone or flesh. So he's talking about those four elements, see? And we all know them. Yeah, we all know that there's earth, water, and there's air, and there's fire. We've all experienced that stuff. But he carries it, or they carry it, into the very makeup of the human body and introduce it into the realm of consciousness. And so what happens then, these Greek minds who actually wrote the Bible placed it in terms of the human mind. Here we see it. Earth, water, air, and fire, and then the good mind, or the God mind, whatever you want to call it. But they took the exact same four elements of Empedocles, Aristotle, and they put them as the staging places of the human consciousness. The place where human consciousness rises to the good mind. Okay? So what is so important about that is that these are the people that wrote the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, and these are the people who placed into it these four significant elements of consciousness. Okay? These are the stages of consciousness. And this is them in different makeups. Medieval, China, New Zealand, everybody has a makeup of consciousness. But this was the one that actually placed those elements into the Bible. Now, just as a small sample here, I want to show you how these four elements of Aristotle and Empedocles were used in the Bible. Before you do, remember them again. The three really that we're going to be talking about here, because earth is the physical, water, air, and fire. Okay, let's look at the first one, fire. Matthew 3:11, I indeed baptize you with water, but he that comes after me shall baptize you with the Holy Ghost and with fire. Nobody in the history of religion has a clue what's being discussed here. But Aristotle could tell you, and so could Empedocles tell you, and since they were the guys that wrote the Bible, they would say to you, well, once you get past the earth or the lower strata of human consciousness, you go into that which is the water, and that is the John the Baptist mythology. Then you rise through the air up to the fire, and so you have the John the Baptist at the water level and the Jesus at the fire level. In other words, in your meditation, as your element of meditation raises your consciousness, you move upward. It has nothing to do with real fire, nothing to do with real water, nothing to do with real air. It's talking about what's inside of you. Now we go to air. 1 Thessalonians 4:17, then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. This is, in Christian circles, they call this rapture. Well, rapture is, I don't know how to tell them, but maybe you could tell them next time you go in. Rapture is a Buddhist philosophy, and it's talking, catching up, taking up. It's talking about a level of the mind, being caught up in the mind, your mind rising within yourself into a higher mind. And so meeting the Lord in the air is that second stage of your meditation. That's the final stage, the fire. This is the third stage, the air. And now, of course, we have that stage that's just above the physical, Matthew 14:28. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be you, tell me to come to you on the water. So he saw Jesus walking on the water, and he gets out of the boat, and he walks on the water. But when he looks down, because what the heck is this, he sinks. This is what this is about. When you're in meditation and you separate from all thought, you're then walking on the water, and that's when you meet Jesus. Separated from all thought, you meet that supreme photon. But you know what happens? And it happens to every single person in the world. You start to think. I mean, it's just the way it is. You start to think, and as soon as you do, you sink. And then you got to try to get back up on top of the water again. But that's what this is all talking about. Water, air, and fire are progressions of your meditation rising upward within yourself to that supreme photon. See? To be baptized with fire means you've elevated your consciousness in meditation. Same with meeting Jesus in the air and walking on the water. This is what baptism is, but because people decided to take Greek mythology literally, probably the most important element of religion was totally destroyed. Okay? I have said this over and over, but let's do it again. Baptism is taking your physical brain, submitting it to meditation where you go into the water, rise out of the water into the air, and then are touched by the fire. All of the photon, subatomic, quantum element within yourself in meditation. Okay? But instead, religion, which has totally missed this, does this. They stick a person's head in the water. For what? Even got his pants wet. For what? They actually believe that there is somebody in the sky who will not get turned on unless this guy gets wet. But you see what they've missed. If they had followed the Aristotle pathway of the Bible, they would have gone into the quantum water, up into the quantum air, and been touched by the quantum fire and had their mind renewed. But instead of having their mind renewed, they got their head wet. And their pants wet too. Just use common sense. Which would, if there's a God up in the sky floating around, which would he prefer? That you have your mind straightened out or you get your head wet?
Just not fair.
And so instead of experience, and you've all experienced the wet head. Everybody does. I mean, a lot of them when you were a baby, you had wet pants, and then the guy comes along and he gives you a wet head. So you're covered. There is nobody in the universe who cares to get your head wet, but there is a supreme photon that wishes for you to be raised in your level of mind to elevate your consciousness. That's what the whole Bible is about. These are scientific realities. Once you as a photon are placed into a human body, you begin to become confused. You live in the photon realm. You go to bed tonight, you're back into the photon realm, and off you go on another adventure. But once you come in to the body, you are part of the higher photon light realm, and but you're in this baby's body. It doesn't know nothing. So who's going to teach you all about what a photon should grow up and be? Your mother and father, who have no clue, because Pastor so-and-so told them. Okay? And so then they send you to the school, and they teach you how a good photon should be, but they don't know what a photon is either. And then you go to business, and before you know it, your photon connection is totally cut. And so then you have to find your way back to the quantum realm. It's so hard because you're so attached to the senses and to the body. It is so hard to realize that even dying only applies to the body. Even dying. It's like when you go to bed tonight, you have no qualms whatsoever of putting this body down somewhere and letting it go off. Because you know, you have what you call dream experiences. You're more active, you're probably more active tonight than you were all day today. You know, all of this stuff we're talking about, it's like when when you first get in a car. How do you work this thing? Did you ever sit there? You know how long it took, me and a computer? I was going crazy. This stuff isn't there. I don't care. Yeah, it's not there. I can't find this. What do you mean you can't find this? I don't know what to say. Sign comes on. The printer is not visible. It's sitting right here. Why can't it's not visible? I don't know. There's no way of knowing. And you got to slug through. But you know what? I found the best thing to do is don't ask anybody. Just go it yourself. That's the meditation route. Don't ask anybody. Go inside and get it straight from the photon guy. I wanted to repeat a couple of things that we saw a few weeks ago. I got about 10 minutes according to this. Is that about right? Okay. I want to repeat a couple of things that before we go on to some others. But and I know we've repeated this, and this is one of the basic things that I shared when I first went on this crusade, if I use that word. But anyhow, hey, this is good. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept, and he took out one of his ribs, and he closed it up, and the rib which he took, he gave to the woman, and then they came together and blah, blah, blah. So we have Adam had a spare rib. He made the lady out of spare ribs, and that was the end of that. I don't believe that. Not even for... you know what? I didn't even know about mythology, and that's why they kicked me out of school. When I was like that, I said, I don't think that happened. Who said that? Oh, you have to have faith. I couldn't have faith then. And then, lo and behold, normally atoms are neutral and have no charge. However, in order to gain stability, they'll sacrifice their neutrality by either losing one or more of its outermost electrons, thus becoming a positive ion, atom, or they will gain one or more electrons, thus becoming a negative ion, Eve. Once this has happened, the resulting charged atoms will attract each other. That electrical attraction between two oppositely charged ions is referred to as an ionic bond. So are you saying that taking a rib out means that he split the atom? Yes. It's nuclear fission. It's an ionic bond. An electron was taken out of here and put into this atom, and we had Adam and Eve. But now, you have to sit and use your common sense and your rational behavior and all that kind of stuff and say, which story seems more reasonable to you? Do you think nature created an ionic bond by moving one electron from one atom to another atom, then causing the positive, negative, male, female to come together? That's what science says. Or are you a religious person and you know that your lady friends are made of spare ribs? He put him to sleep and he ripped the rib out. Why would he even have to do that? I mean, if he could create the whole thing, why? Do you see what I'm saying? It's so stupid because if this thing called God was capable of creating the man in the first place, wouldn't he be capable of creating a woman? Of course. Would he have to put the man to sleep and take a rib out? Or would this be reasonable to say that all of the life forces in the universe came together in an ionic bond? So it seemed very reasonable. The other, and when you get to there, you know that Aristotle and Empedocles and Democritus had a hand in writing the Bible because nobody else knew of the movement of atoms and electrons and ionic bonding at that time except them. We got a couple of minutes, just time probably for this one other one, which we've done before. Okay, the The orbital velocity of the Earth is approximately 1/10,000th of the speed of light. Given our present knowledge of the speed of light, 186,400 miles, 186,400 miles. The Earth's orbital velocity is hence measured as 18.5 miles, blah, 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 per second. Speed of light, 186,400 miles per second. And we go into the Bible. And in Numbers 2:9, all that were numbered in the camp of Judah. The camp of Judah in the Bible was called the tribe of light. They were preserved because God promised to give David a light. How many people were in the tribe? 100,000. 4,000, that's 4 times 20, which is 80,000. 6,400. Whoa, 186,400. Now, why does that intrigue me? It intrigued me because it means Democritus wrote the Bible. I mean, or Empedocles or whomever, one of those guys. Because where did this stuff come from? We know that they wrote it. We know they wrote it in Alexandria. And here you've seen two things, nuclear fission, ionic bonding, and now you got the constant speed of light in the tribe of light. Why? Because it's telling you that this whole thing is based on the photon. It's based on the angles of light. It's based on the laser lights which naturally produce and can enter into your head and begin to talk to you. 6 minutes. 6 minutes? 6 minutes. 2 minutes? Oh. Dastardly, I wanted to show you about the high priest taking a leg of lamb and waving it over his shoulder. So God.
Well, go ahead.
All right. Go ahead. Number 6:19, and the priest shall take the shoulder of the ram and 1 unleavened cake out of the basket, and the priest shall wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. You can see them out there. There's pork chop. No, not pork chops. Lamb chop. John Kramer's transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics. Reading from the top down. Emitter E, let's call it God, sends out an offer wave. Oh, that's familiar. An offering wave, okay. Into the future, and then it's picked up by absorber A, us. God sends it out, an offering wave to us, okay, which sends out a confirmation offering wave. Here we go, a confirmation offering wave. And the offering wave and the confirmation wave cancel out each other everywhere, but between them two, they reinforce one another to produce a quantum transaction. This diagram you need to understand in order to understand all of the quantum mysteries. In other words, what we call God sends out a wave, and then what we call us sends out a wave, and the two waves touch and a transaction is completed. The way you send out a wave is by stimulating the pineal gland of the brain, and when the electrons of the brain are stimulated, they attract the photons which are descending from the offer wave. This is what it's about. Now, here you go. This is tough. You have to decide if the offering wave of the quantum science is what is meant here, or should this guy wave hamburgers and cheeseburgers and lamb chops and stuff? Which one? You see? And so when really you get to the point of saying, gosh, this, then you have opened yourself up to documentation and confirmation that what is hidden in the Bible is truly the book of life. Okay. I guess that's 2 minutes, right, Jen? All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.